This is a CBS News special report. I'm Anthony Mason reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York. Good day. President Trump is in Paris, where he is about to make a joint appearance with the President of France, Emmanuel Macron. They've been meeting in Élysée Palace, the official residence of the French president. And now we expect each man to make a statement to reporters and take a couple of questions. There's a good chance Mr. Trump will be asked about the Russia investigation and the meeting his son Don Jr. had last year with a Russian lawyer offering dirt on Hillary Clinton. Revelations of that meeting have thrown the White House into some turmoil, although the president tweeted yesterday that the White House is, quote, functioning perfectly. These two men have had a somewhat unusual, even awkward relationship that started with a handshake that was almost a wrestling match earlier this year. They've both overturned their political establishments, but they're politically very different. Mr. Trump praised Macron's opponent during the election in France, right-wing Marine Le Pen. But it's Mr. Macron who invited President Trump for a Bastille Day celebration. John Dickerson is joining us now. He's the chief White House correspondent, chief Washington correspondent, and the anchor of Face the Nation. John, what are we expecting here?
Well, as you mentioned, this is a bumpy relationship. It's not only that Macron has different policy views than the president, but that he sometimes seemed to be seeking advantage at President Trump's expense. There was that handshake which he seemed to use as a symbolic moment to show that the French will not be bullied by the American president. And then when President Trump withdrew from the Paris Climate Accords, Macron put out a statement on Twitter basically saying, "Make the planet great again," using the president's phrase to separate the United States, to cast it outside of the norms of the community of nations. Now, however, this is a moment of prestige to have the American president there at this celebration, and in return, one that the president is enjoying. He likes to be there in the pride of place. And now as a guest, and with the French president as the host, it can't be anything symbolically other than a good meeting. So it's already sort of pre-designed to push all of that other stuff in the past and provide both men with a symbolic moment, which for the president, given what's happening in the States at the moment, is a welcome relief.
Major Garrett is at the White House for us. Major, this is the first time we've seen the president really since the G20. He returned from the G20 since last weekend.
That's right. The president and much of the White House staff have had what can best be described a bunker mentality all this week, trying to deal with the revelations about Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting in June of 2016 with a Russian lawyer with Kremlin ties and all of the various fallout from that. That has not made this White House paralyzed necessarily, but it has made it very cautious. And the president very reluctant to be seen publicly, so reluctant he hasn't done it at all. Run of show here at this press conference, or this press availability, is probably a better way to describe it. Two questions, two from the French press, two from the traveling American press. So it will be an opportunity perhaps to hear the president in a televised way address the controversy around his son, Donald Trump Jr. And as John Dickerson pointed out, this is not a trip to resolve differences between President Trump and President Macron or those in Europe on trade or climate. Those are the two most important. It is largely symbolic and a celebration of the historic alliance. And even President Macron said this morning, the American president, whatever controversies exist, is still indispensable in Europe. A force of economics, a force of military strength, and a force that has to be reckoned with. President Trump clearly believes that to be true and says, in the main, differences over climate and trade can be worked out over time. That, of course, is a prediction. We don't have a reality around that quite yet.
It's interesting, Major, because what you're sort of seeing a shift in the U.S. alliances overseas as President Trump has had some disagreements with Angela Merkel in Germany. The British Prime Minister is in some trouble after a very close election there, and you're watching President Macron essentially try to sort of insert himself here in some way, aren't we?
Certainly, and the timing of this is symbolic. The 100th anniversary of American troops joining Allied forces decisively, it's worth pointing out, in World War I, and Bastille Day, and the long historic relationship between the United States and France. Anyone who's a student of American revolutionary history knows France was indispensable in America's revolutionary victory over the British. So all of that is true, and American presidents and French leaders have always embraced that and held that up in moments of stress. This is not necessarily the greatest moment of stress, but it is a difference. President Trump brings a very different set of rhetoric and approaches to issues that European leaders have grown accustomed to dealing with American presidents in a certain way. Globalization is good, harmonized economies, coordinated economic activities, also very good. This president says no. Trade has to be reciprocal, which means it has to benefit America more than anyone else, or at least equally. The president doesn't believe the current structure does that. That ruffles a great deal of feathers in Europe, in France, Germany, England, and elsewhere. But that's the reality, and the European leaders are beginning to adapt to that reality if they don't necessarily agree with it.
John, we know Russia is not the president's favorite subject. Does he have an opportunity to try to put it behind him here?
Well, he has an opportunity to put it behind him to the extent that he doesn't address that subject or addresses it quickly and moves on. Like presidents before him, and this is a part of an American tradition, trips overseas, and particularly ones that are so steeped in symbolism as this one, are an opportunity to inhabit the role of the presidency physically and in all of its symbolic corners. And so that, in a way, moves away from the question of Russia just simply by allowing him to do something entirely different. He will no doubt face questions, though, about his son or about the ongoing questions related to Russian election interference and or any connection to his campaign. He took a swing at answering those questions in an interview with Reuters. He will no doubt try to say something and move on, because whatever he says, he knows is going to be in the headlines coming out of this meeting. He would rather have other kinds of headlines, no doubt. And particularly ones that that show that on the world stage he is representing America and can maybe appeal to people's natural instinct to rally for their president when the president is abroad.
Yeah, the president said in that Reuters interview, "I think many people would have held that meeting," in reference to the meeting his son and Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort had with the Russian attorney. But Vice President Mike Pence came out with a statement this morning, just before this meeting between the two leaders, saying the vice president has had no meetings with any individual associated with the Russian government during the campaign or transition. The timing of that was sort of interesting. John Dickerson?
Well, yes, and that timing was in part created by the fact that there was not a clean, clear answer from the vice president on any meetings he might have had, so they had to clean that up a little bit. But just on the president's claim that anybody would have taken this meeting, now the president's going to be speaking. Yeah.
Mrs. Macron, this is a wonderful national celebration, and we look very much forward to it. It'll be spectacular. Tomorrow, Bastille Day. We're honored to be here in your beautiful country, and it certainly is a beautiful country, with its proud history and its magnificent people, and thank you for the tour of some of the most incredible buildings anywhere in the world. That was very, very, very beautiful thing to see. Thank you. When the French people rose up and stormed the Bastille, it changed the course of human history. Our two nations are forever joined together by the spirit of revolution and the fight for freedom. France is America's first and oldest ally. A lot of people don't know that. Ever since General Lafayette joined the American fight for independence, our fates and fortunes have been tied unequivocally together. It was a long time ago, but we are together. And I think together perhaps more so than ever. The relationship is very good. This visit also commemorates another milestone. 1 century ago, the United States entered World War I. And when the president called me, he had mentioned that fact 100 years ago, and it was, I said, Mr. President, I will be there. That's a big, important date, 100 years. We remember the tens of thousands of Americans who gave their lives in that valiant and very difficult struggle. We also pay tribute to the heroic deeds of the French troops whose courage at the Battle of Marne and countless other battles will never be forgotten by us. More than 1 million French soldiers laid down their lives in defense of liberty. Their sacrifice is an eternal tribute to France and to freedom. French and American patriots have fought together, bled together, and died together in the fight for our countries and our civilizations. Today, we face new threats from rogue regimes like North Korea, Iran, and Syria, and the governments that finance and support them. We also face grave threats from terrorist organizations that wage war on innocent lives. Tomorrow will mark 1 year since a joyous Bastille Day celebration in Nice turned into a massacre. We all remember that, how horrible that was. We mourn the 86 lives that were stolen, and we pray for their loved ones. We also renew our resolve to stand united against these enemies of humanity and to strip them of their territory, their funding, their networks, and ideological support. Today, President Macron and myself discussed how we can strengthen our vital security partnerships. We just had a meeting with our generals and our representatives, and it went very well. France has excellent counterterrorism capabilities. The French troops are serving bravely in places like Mali to defeat these forces of murder and destruction. The United States and our allies strengthen our commitments to defeat terrorism. We're also making tremendous progress. Earlier this week, with the strong support of the United States and the global coalition, Iraq forces liberated the city of Mosul from ISIS control. Now we must work with the government of Iraq and our partners and allies in the region to consolidate the gains and ensure that the victory stays a victory, unlike the last time. Last week, the G20 leaders also reaffirmed the right to sovereign nations to control their borders. We must be strong from within to defend ourselves from threats from the outside. The nations of the West also face domestic challenges of our own creation, including vast government bureaucracy that saps the strength from our economies and from our societies. For this reason, I applaud President Macron on his courageous call for that less bureaucracy. It's a good chant, less bureaucracy. We can use it too. And a Europe that protects its citizens. We did not become great through regulation. And in the United States, Mr. President, we also have cut regulations at a level that we've never seen before. So we're very proud of that over the last 6 months. But by allowing our people to follow their dreams, that's what it's all about. To achieve these dreams, however, we must also confront unfair trade practices that hurt our workers and pursue trade deals that are reciprocal and fair. Both President Macron and I understand our responsibility to prioritize the interests of our countries and, at the same time, to be respectful of the world in which we live. We live in a very complex world. We have to respect it. The United States remains committed to being a leader in environmental protection while we advance energy security and economic growth. The friendship between our two nations and ourselves, I might add, is unbreakable. Our occasional disagreements are nothing compared to the immortal bonds of culture, destiny, and liberty that unite us, so strongly unite us also. As long as we have pride in who we are, where we've come from, how we got here, and what we've achieved as free and democratic nations, then there is nothing we cannot accomplish together. France helped us secure our independence. A lot of people forget. In the American Revolution, thousands of French soldiers fought alongside American troops so that, as Lafayette said, liberty would have a country. Ever since then, courageous heroes from both nations have fought for the same noble values and the same righteous cause. Tomorrow, the French tricolor will once again wave proudly alongside the American Stars and Stripes. Our brave soldiers will march side by side, and we will all be inspired to protect and cherish the birthright of freedom that our ancestors won for us with their sweat and with their blood. President Macron, thank you for inviting Melania and myself to this historic celebration. And to you and your spectacular country, may God bless France, and may God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Très bien. Nous allons prendre, je crois, 4 questions.
Very well. I think we will be taking 4 questions.
Mais ni le président Trump ni moi-même n'avons un micro.
Neither President Trump nor myself have a microphone.
Let's go.
Alors.
He's getting first question, President.
Voilà. Allez-y.
Messieurs les présidents, bonjour. Alison Tassin, LCI. D'abord, une
question from
par
LCI. Sure. The question, first of all, President Macron, regarding what you said on the occasion of the press conference together with Chancellor Merkel. Do you still hope that President Trump, or did you still hope that President Trump could change his mind regarding the Paris Accord? And now, President Trump, is it possible for you to come back to the Paris Accord and change your mind? Next, regarding your relation, how would you describe it today? What about the dinner tonight? Is it going to be a dinner between friends? Well, regarding climate, well, we have a number of disagreements which are in particular due to the commitments taken by President Trump vis-à-vis his during the presidential campaign. So did I. I'm aware of how important that is, but we therefore talked about our disagreement, and we actually discussed the matter even before President Trump reached a decision. Next, should that have an impact on the discussions we are having on all other topics? No, absolutely not. This is the reason why we share the same views and some major common goals on many other topics, or all other topics, which we've been discussing today, and we shall move forward together. Next, well, of course, President Trump will tell you about it, but he's made a number of commitments, and we're going to be working together, and my willingness is to continue to work with the United States and President on this very major topic. I understand that it's important to save jobs. That being said, we shall leave the United States of America work on what is its roadmap and continue to talk about it. So today there's nothing new and unprecedented, otherwise we would have told you about it. But I believe there is a joint willingness to continue to talk about this and try and find the best possible agreement. As far as I'm concerned, I remain extremely attached to the framework of the Paris Accord, which has been a major international breakthrough, and it is within that framework that I'm working on our priorities, including for the European Union. Lastly, as you know, I never very much want to comment who we are and what we're doing personally, but I can tell you that this evening at the Eiffel Tower it will be a dinner between friends, because we are the representatives of two countries which have been allies forever, and because we've been able to build a strong relation which is dear to me, because it matters a great deal for both our countries. It will therefore give me great pleasure to have dinner together with you tonight.
I think that I can reiterate, we have a very good relationship, a good friendship, and we look forward to dinner tonight at the Eiffel Tower. That'll be something special. And yeah, I mean, something could happen with respect to the Paris Accord. We'll see what happens. But we will talk about that over the coming period of time. And if it happens, that'll be wonderful. And if it doesn't, that'll be okay too. But we'll see what happens. But we did discuss many things today, including the ceasefire in Syria, and we discussed the Ukraine. We discussed a lot of different topics. We briefly hit on the Paris Accord, and we'll see what happens. Okay? Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur President. Mr. President, your FBI nominee said if someone in a campaign got an email about Russia like the one that your son Don Jr. received, that they should alert the FBI rather than accept that meeting. Is he wrong? Also, were you misled by your team in not knowing about this meeting? And Mr. President, thank you very much. You have heard President Trump say that it may have been Russia, it may have been others who interfered with the U.S. election. Is President Trump taking a hard enough line on Russia as you see it? Merci.
Well, I'll start off by saying, first of all, I believe that we will have a great FBI director. I think he's doing really well. And we're very proud of that choice. I think I've done a great service to the country by choosing him. He will make us all proud, and I think someday we'll see that, and hopefully someday soon. So we're very proud of him. As far as my son is concerned, my son is a wonderful young man. He took a meeting with a Russian lawyer, not a government lawyer, but a Russian lawyer. It was a short meeting. It was a meeting that went very, very quickly, very fast. Two other people in the room, I guess one of them left almost immediately, and the other one was not really focused on the meeting. I do think this. I think from a practical standpoint, most people would have taken that meeting. It's called opposition research or even research into your opponent. I've had many people, I have only been in politics for 2 years, but I've had many people call up, oh, gee, we have information on this factor or this person or, frankly, Hillary. That's very standard in politics. Politics is not the nicest business in the world, but it's very standard where they have information and you take the information. In the case of Don, he listened. I guess they talked about, as I see it, they talked about adoption and some things. Adoption wasn't even a part of the campaign. But nothing happened from the meeting. Zero happened from the meeting. And honestly, I think the press made a very big deal over something that really a lot of people would do. Now, the lawyer that went to the meeting, I see that she was in the halls of Congress also. Somebody said that her visa or her passport to come into the country was approved by Attorney General Lynch. Now, maybe that's wrong. I just heard that a little while ago, but it's a little surprised to hear that. So she was here because of Lynch. So, again, I have a son who's a great young man. He's a fine person. He took a meeting with a lawyer from Russia. It lasted for a very short period, and nothing came of the meeting. And I think it's a meeting that most people in politics probably would have taken. Mr. President?
Yes, to answer your question, I will not interfere in the U.S. domestic policy, and I think it's always good between partners and allies not to interfere in the other's domestic life.
What a good answer that is.
and I do believe that both of us have direct relationship with Russia. President Trump had more than 2 hours meeting with President Putin during the past G20, the last G20, and myself, I had 2 very long meetings with President Putin, the very first one in Versailles and the second one during the G20, and this relationship is very important. We have a lot of disagreements. We have a lot of discrepancies, obviously, with Russia. But in the current environment, especially in the Middle East, it's a necessity to work together, to exchange information, to share disagreements, and to try to build solutions. So that's my relationship with Russia. And we don't have, obviously, the same relationship as the one with the US, but that's a long-standing relationship with Russia as well. And I think it's important that both of us have direct discussion and contact with President Putin.
One of the great things that came out of that meeting, by the way, even though it's not part of the question, was the fact that we got a ceasefire that now has lasted for, I guess, Mr. President, almost 5 days. And while 5 days doesn't sound like a long period of time, in terms of a ceasefire in Syria, that's a very long period of time. And that was a result of having communication with a country. So during that 5-day period, a lot of lives have been saved. A lot of people were not killed. No shots have been fired in a very, very dangerous part of the world, and this is one of the most dangerous parts of Syria itself. So by having some communication and dialogue, we were able to have a ceasefire, and it's going to go on for a while. And frankly, we're working on a second ceasefire in a very rough part of Syria. And if we get that and a few more, all of a sudden you're going to have no bullets being fired in Syria, and that would be a wonderful thing. Mr. President, you have a question?
Troisième question.
Oui, bonsoir, Monsieur le Président. Mathieu Coach, BFM TV. D'abord, une question pour Monsieur Macron.
BFM TV, a question to President Macron. You went to Lausanne in order to support Paris' bid for the Olympic Games, and on this occasion, you somehow criticized President Trump's policy without naming him. You said that France made a very clear choice to leave its border open and not to build walls to protect its people. Do you condemn the Muslim ban and the building of a wall between the United States and Mexico? Regarding Syria, as it was just mentioned by President Trump, does France stand ready to talk directly with Bashar al-Assad in the negotiation that you mentioned?
You've mentioned a friend, Jim, who told you that Paris is no longer Paris. You were implying at the time that Paris was not safe anymore. You've also said that France and Germany are infected by terrorism, and, quote, it's their fault because they let people enter their territory. Those are very strong words. Would you repeat them today? And do you still believe that France is not able to fight terrorism on its own territory? Thank you.
You better let me answer that one first. That's a beauty. He's the one that asked the question. That wasn't even one of my picks. You know what? It's going to be just fine because you have a great president. You have somebody that's going to run this country right. And I would be willing to bet, because I think this is one of the great cities, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And you have a great leader now. You have a great president. You have a tough president. He's not going to be easy on people that are breaking the laws and people that show this tremendous violence. So I really have a feeling that you're going to have a very, very peaceful and beautiful Paris. And I'm coming back. You better do a good job, please. Otherwise, you're going to make me look very bad.
And you're always welcome.
Thank you.
Sur la première question, j'ai répondu à ce sujet.
Regarding the first question, like I said, I believe that the discussions that we've had today is the proper answer to terrorism. The right answer is strengthen cooperation between our services.
Sans merci dans tous les théâtres d'opération où les terroristes s'organisent.
Never-ending fight against terrorists, no matter where they are. This is what I was referring to. This is what we are working on actively together. So in this respect, there is no difference and no gap between the French and the American positions. When I have something to say, I say it clearly, and I do say who I'm aiming at. And when I refer to those who've been my opponents in the French political battle, I also mention the names. So let us not mix up everything. And regarding the fight against terrorism, I think that the right approach is to have a strengthened cooperation in the field of intelligence, is also to be working together on all the theaters of operation where we are, and I think that the decisions we've reached, they will enable us to do more. Next, your question regarding Bashar al-Assad, which is an important one. Let me put it simply. Indeed, we now have a new approach of Syria, because we want some results and we want to be closely working together with our partners, including the United States of America. We have one main goal, which is to eradicate terrorism, no matter who they are. We want to build an inclusive and sustainable political solution. Against that background, I do not require Assad's departure. This is no longer a prerequisite for France to work on that, because I can only tell you that for 7 years we did not have an embassy in Damas, and still we have no solution. Next, we also have a common red line together with President Trump. He intervened before I was elected, and I said it to President Putin after my election: no use whatsoever of chemical weapons. Any use will lead to reaction, an attack against a reaction regarding the storage spaces. And next, we also want humanitarian corridors. Also, we want to build a sustainable political stability for Syria. This is our roadmap. In order to stick to it, we need a diplomatic initiative beyond our military actions. This is what we've been agreeing upon, because we want to take an initiative with the members of the Security Council and a number of countries involved in the process. Of course, there will be representatives of Assad that will enable us to put in place the roadmap for after the war. But there will also be representatives of the Syrian opposition and people with different backgrounds, and we will talk to all of them against that background. One last question for an American journalist.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Phoenix TV of China. Ma question est adressée à deux présidents. Monsieur le Président Macron, vous avez eu la première rencontre.
For both presidents, Mr. Macron, you had your first meeting with the Chinese president during the G20 summit. What will France do? How will France cooperate with all of these areas with China? And what do you think personally of Mr. Xi Jinping?
You have just met Chinese president during the G20 summit. And how do you want continue to work with China, and what do you personally think about Mr. Xi Jinping? Thank you very much.
Well, he's a friend of mine. I have great respect for him. We've gotten to know each other very well. A great leader. He's a very talented man. I think he's a very good man. He loves China, I can tell you. He loves China. He wants to do what's right for China. We've asked him for some assistance with respect to North Korea. Probably he could do a little bit more, but we'll find out. We're now working on some trade deals. He's been very nice. He's let, as you know, beef go back in, certain financing go back in, credit card financing, and various other things go back in at my request, which is a great thing for our farmers. So a lot of good things are happening, but we're going to be working on some very major trade components. But President Xi is a terrific guy. I like being with him a lot. And he's a very special person. Okay? Thank you.
J'ai eu le premier entretien physique après une discussion téléphonique avec le président Xi.
I first talked to President Xi over the telephone, then I got to meet him in the margin of the G20 summit in Hamburg. Early next year, I will be traveling to China. We've agreed to it. So I cannot say that he's a friend of mine or that I know him very well, because I very much want to say things as they are. But we had some initial contacts which were extremely fruitful and positive. I have a lot of respect for President Xi, and I would like to say that over the past few months he did express his willingness to have a vision for multilateralism and wanted to commit himself on a number of topics. I think that many of us remember his words in Davos, and he there very strongly expressed his vision of the role of China. We have a number of joint commitments, including on climate. He's very committed to that, and he told me that he wanted to do more in the field, and I can only be happy about it. He wants some strong cooperation. And like President Trump said, there are also the trade issues, and regarding a number of activities, there are issues, there are differences, but a joint willingness to sort them out. And as permanent members of the Security Council, we want to work together on all of the topics we've been discussing today. And China, in this respect, is a key partner in order to build peace all around the world. And I share what President just said, that China is to play a very specific role regarding the rising tension, the growing tension with North Korea, and it's important that China can play fully its role in the region. In summary, I think he's today one of the great leaders of our world, implementing a major and ambitious reform of China, society and the economy in China, and therefore my willingness in this respect as well is to have a strategic dialogue, the purpose of which is to continue to talk about the industry, civil nuclear industry, economic matters, and talk about any difficulties we may have together.
Très bien. Il nous reste à vous remercier, mesdames et messieurs.
Allow me to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and once again thank President Trump for his visit, and I will be seeing him in a few moments in a friendly atmosphere.
Thank you very much. Great honor. Thank you.
President Donald Trump in a joint appearance in Paris with French President Emmanuel Macron. President Trump said France is America's first and oldest ally. The friendship between our two nations and ourselves, I might add, President Trump said, is unbreakable. The president also elaborated on some comments he'd made about his son's meeting with a Russian attorney at Trump Tower. The president said, most people would have taken that meeting. It's called opposition research. I've had many people call up. That's very standard. Politics is not the nicest business. Nothing happened. Zero happened. The press made a big deal out of something really anyone would do. Major Garrett is joining us from the White House. Major, what do you make of that?
Well, the open contradictions are in sharp relief. The president was asked if he agreed with his FBI director nominee, Christopher Wray, who told the Senate yesterday that what Donald Trump Jr. should have done upon receiving an email soliciting his involvement in a meeting to obtain potentially damaging information about Hillary Clinton was to call the FBI. The president glossed over that part of the question entirely, telling the nation that Christopher Wray was going to be a great FBI director, but ignoring the very contradiction of what his FBI director said his son should have done, which Donald Trump Jr. clearly did not do. Also, the president said nothing happened in that meeting, glossing over the fact that Donald Trump, by his own admission, Donald Trump Jr., by his own admission, has said he wished it had. He said it's unfortunate that the meeting only lasted 20 minutes and the promised opposition research on Hillary Clinton from those aligned with the Russian government didn't materialize. The president glossed over that. So these contradictions are there for the public to see. The president described it as ordinary, standard. His future FBI director, if confirmed by the Senate, did not describe it that way at all. And the president overlooked the fact that his own son said he wished he could have obtained said political opposition research on Hillary Clinton. One last point, and this didn't come up, but it's worth noting. The president again on Twitter called the entire Russia investigation a witch hunt. Again, his FBI director nominee, Christopher Wray, told the Senate, clearly it is not. Anthony? Let's also bring in John Dickerson. John, what do you make of these remarks? And also what we talked about before this appearance, that Vice President Mike Pence has put out a statement this morning saying that he had no meetings with any individual associated with the Russian government during the campaign or the transition.
Well, the president's remarks about his son, just to pick up on what Major was saying, in campaigns, absolutely, opposition research happens. What's different in this case is two things. One, it usually is done by somebody you never see, that it's somebody off in a side room. This was done by the three of the top, this meeting took place with three of the top people in the campaign. And remember how the meeting was offered before it went forward and was reportedly a bust. It was an offer from the Russian government. The previous nominee of the Republican Party said the Russians were America's number one global threat. So this isn't coming from any old source. This is coming from an adversary, or what some people would say, many Republicans, an enemy of the United States. And so that's the distinction here between the normal dark business of opposition research in a campaign and what was put before the president's son when this email came through. Again, what was offered was that it was coming from the Russian government, which is different from what may have actually happened in the actual event. The vice president is, I think, buttoning up what was kind of a loose end there with his statement, but also because he has been an actor in this drama in a little bit because he made claims about no one in the Trump campaign talking to any Russians, as if the very notion of such a meeting was distasteful. So that has had to be modified in light of new events. One thing I would just finally say about this actual meeting, it was extraordinary, effusive between two men. There has been some question about whether the president understood the historical partnerships, particularly in Europe, that are a part of the American national security picture. And judging from his behavior here, his really personal praise and strong support and politically correct, I should say, in some instances, comments about the French leader, this shows that he is able to inhabit that role of the symbolic American cheerleader for these longtime alliances, as previous presidents have as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because it was pointed out to the president that he had said previously that France was infected by terrorism and that Paris is not Paris anymore. But he said today it's going to be just fine because you have a great president. You're going to have a peaceful and very peaceful and beautiful Paris, and I'm coming back. And President Macron says, you're always welcome. They will have dinner this evening at the Eiffel Tower in a restaurant owned by famous chef Alain Ducasse, the Jules Verne restaurant. There will be more about all of this on your local news on this CBS station, on our 24-hour streaming news network, CBSN, and tonight on the CBS Evening News. Till then, I'm Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
For news 24 hours a day, go to CBSNews.com.